you said not everybody can do it in reference to entrepreneurship. It's not for everybody.
When I say it's not for everybody, it's not to say that you cannot. That's not what I mean. What I mean is when I hear about entrepreneurship and you hear about kind of starting your own business or like leaving the 9 to 5, like leaving that kind of like grind life, and it's not the same story for everyone. Massive brush where it's like, okay, if you just do X, Y, and Z, you'll be fine. But I think it takes a lot of nuance out of the conversation that I think is missed when people have to take that massive step, right?
I think what you're getting at is the concept of risk. A lot of people are depending on you and you're living paycheck to paycheck. It's a lot harder to pull that trigger. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesdays Off podcast. Today, my guest is Travis Boyco, the owner of Travis Boyco Creative, an Ottawa-based digital graphic and web designer that helps companies, teams, and people stand out in the digital age. You can learn more about his business and his services at travisboyco.com. That's TravisBoyco.com. Travis, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Travis, tell us a little bit about what you do, how you came to do it for a living, and why it's so meaningful and important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you rightfully said, I'm a creative professional based out of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. I've been in the creative industry for, I want to say more than 14 years. Doing a variety of different roles in the creative space. I was primarily coming from a communications and marketing background. I've done a lot of graphic design work, especially from my education. And over the past about 3 years now, I've been running my own creative business. I started it after working in the corporate space for a number of years. Why it's important to me? I mean, like a lot of people, I think, and especially a lot of creative folks, I love providing a really unique service to my clients. I like the ability to be creative, create some really cool stuff that I have control over. I have a lot of oversight on a lot of the projects, even though I obviously am working with a variety of different clients, and what they say is kind of the name of the game. But I love to have my own little spin on things and to be creative in my day-to-day. That's super important to me.
Lots of the guests I've had on the show so far have been at the entrepreneurship game quite a while, a decade or so. Some of them have even exited, and we talk about what the experience is like. Being that you're relatively newer to the game, I'd love to ask you the question, why is entrepreneurship important to you?
It's a good question. Yeah, it's funny you say that, because you're entirely right. There's a lot of folks who've been doing this their entire life. I feel like for myself and perhaps a lot of folks in my generation, or at least who I surround myself with, and people I've either worked with or I've gone to school with, it's not initially the first step that people take. It's something where I find a lot of people are either kind of nudged to, or perhaps they don't like their previous role, so they decide, you know what, maybe I'll just try and do something for myself. And for me, it's kind of a bit of both, and it's important to me because it's something that's entirely a new concept for me. I never planned to be an entrepreneur. That was never in the cards. I had always thought I was going to be more of a corporate person doing more like the 9 to 5 situation. So for me, it's important to not only do it because it's something I'm really passionate about now, obviously having done it for a couple of years now and hoping to grow a business, but it's important because it's proven to myself that I can do it. It's proven that I have a sustainable idea. I have a business model that works. Yeah, it's just important for a variety of reasons.
What was it that made you decide? If this wasn't kind of what you were thinking of all along, what was it that made you say, you know what? No, I'm gonna try to put up my own shingle and go out on my own?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question. So I was working a corporate role in the past for, I want to say 3-4 years. I was having an okay time there, and I really enjoyed the people I was working with, and I enjoyed the content that I was working on. But what I found was I was somewhat limited from a creative perspective. I had been doing freelance work for a number of years prior, and that was something that I was doing while I was working there full time. And as I kind of went on, I noticed that because I was doing all this freelance work, I had all this opportunity to work with a variety of different clients. Every project was different. The industries that I was working with were different. It's not kind of the same thing on a day to day. I started to notice like, okay, this is really interesting. Let's see if I can start to pursue this a little more. So as I kind of ramped up a little bit more of my freelance, I noticed that like a lot of the clients I was working with, they just kept coming back.
Yeah.
There were a lot of folks who really resonated with the style of work that I did and kind of the pace of work that I was working on. And I found that was it was almost like a proof point that's like, okay, this is something that I should really pursue. And if I don't pursue it, will I be upset that I don't pursue it? Is it something that I'm like, if I devote even just, I don't know, let's say 10 more hours each week, and I notice that those 10 hours are completely filled with work and time, what if I did 20 hours the next week? And eventually it got to a point where it just became a sustainable business model. I can juggle the two, right? So I
Was it
decided, let's do it.
Was it the prospect of greater money, the prospect of greater creative fulfillment, the prospect of greater autonomy? What was it
Yeah, yeah,
that because you had to choose, right? You had to either choose to keep
totally.
growing your business or stay where you were.
Yeah, totally. I would say it's a healthy combination of all three of those. I feel like a lot of folks could paint their kind of like entrepreneurial journey in a variety of different with a variety of different brushes. Let's say a lot of folks could decide, you know what, there's a big opportunity to make some money here. Let's go for it. I was kind of going across all three of those things. So the money, the autonomy, and the creativity. I think my role specifically allows for a nice little blend of all of that. The money option is nice because you have the opportunity to really make a name for yourself, and you can grow however you decide because it is your choice, and you can decide to take on projects, whether it is more one day or you decide to take a week off to to take a breath or whatever, what have you. That wasn't the sole reason why. It was nice, and I like being able to control my time, but I think it was also the creativity point where I can do things in the way that I want to do them. I see things a certain way, and I like to create content based off of that vision. And I've worked in the space for long enough where I feel like my ability to discern what is potentially a unique option, I won't say best or worst, but I have a unique lens that I think people can appreciate. And when you're in the corporate space, you're kind of confined to a specific kind of like, you have guardrails on each project. You have to abide by certain things based off of stakeholders, based off of brand, all that kind of stuff. So the ability to kind of stay away from that, or at least have different guardrails for each product, was really, really interesting. And yeah, just the autonomy. I like being able to do the things that I do for myself.
I think most entrepreneurs report that autonomy is the number one reason they go into it. And I don't have the study, but I've heard that from several different places. Also resonates true anecdotally with every entrepreneur I've ever met. The autonomy is high on the list. Also personally, that was my main driver. And then we have a situation where somebody loves to cook, or somebody loves to work out, or somebody loves to do something, and they start a business in that because they want to do it for themselves and they want to have autonomy. And they find that they're doing everything but that thing that they love, and that they're now running a business, and they didn't necessarily think that that was the fun thing to do.
Yeah.
I bring that up because when I asked you, what is a lie you'd love to dispel on this podcast, you said, not everybody can do it, in reference to entrepreneurship. It's not for everybody. And as much as it pains me to admit that, because I want to tell everybody out there that they can be an entrepreneur, I have to admit that there's merit to what you're saying. So tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, totally. And when I say it's not for everybody, it's not to say that you cannot, and that there are certain people who are just just not able to do it. Like that's not what I mean. What I mean is, when I think in my experience, at least when I hear about entrepreneurship and you hear about kind of starting your own business, or like leaving the 9 to 5, like leaving that kind of like grind life, it's I don't know, there's such a massive gray area, and it's not the same story for everyone, right? Like when people are being told they should leave their job, or maybe they're interested in leaving their job, it's kind of painted with this like massive brush where it's like, okay, if you just do X, Y, and Z, you'll be fine. But I think it takes a lot of nuance out of the conversation that I think is missed when people have to take that massive step, right? Like, so for example, say you are a single parent, you can't just leave your job because there are people depending on you. You have to pay your rent, you have to pay your mortgage. Like there are considerations versus say someone is still in school, or say someone has a lot of student debt. Like they can't just quit their job that is paying the bills and putting kind of this debt away. It doesn't make sense for them. For me, it made a lot more sense because I have a partner who works full time, who's employed. So worst case scenario, if something were to happen, I have some support there. I don't have any children. I'm not in school anymore, and I've been relatively established in my career. So there are a lot of like safety nets for me that I think you can't just apply the same story across the board to every person who wants to start a business, right?
I think what you're getting at is the concept of risk. Just recently had a podcast episode where we were talking about the difference between risk and exposure. Different people have different tolerances for what they're willing to do, and
Totally.
the circumstances you just described may flavor somebody's, perspective one way or another, right? If a lot of people are depending on you and you're living paycheck to paycheck, it's a lot harder to pull that trigger and go your own way. One of the really interesting things about that though is if you have nothing, it's almost easier. You know what I mean?
It's true.
Like
Yeah.
there's this middle ground where you have enough to get by and you're kind of trapped there, and
Hmm.
you have enough to not want to risk it all, but if you were below that line, you would have no problem taking a huge risk and saying, I've got nothing to lose, so I might as well do it. I think that's a very
Yeah.
interesting situation for the human condition to be in that space.
Totally. I'm sure there's like a sweet spot in there, and I think yeah, maybe that risk is a big part of that. And I think from my perspective, like even though I am doing this and I am self-employed, I run my own thing, and if things were to fall through tomorrow, that's that. But even for me, like I am still heavily risk averse, I would say. I think I also have the benefit of being in an industry and in a business that I don't necessarily have to be as risky with things. For example, my goal has never been to like massively scale and
Mhm.
take on heaps of employees and do all that kind of stuff. Like the idea of business loans and all that kind of stuff, that scares me.
Mhm.
And even though I did leave the 9 to 5 where there are those kind of safety nets, and you have a regular wage and you have benefits and all that kind of stuff, I'm still relatively risk averse in comparison to, I would say, a lot of folks who kind of start their own thing.
It's funny too how it shows up over and over again. You just said, I'm not necessarily interested in scaling huge, but I know a lot of entrepreneurs who theoretically are interested in growing their business, but their business has reached that sweet spot
Mm,
where it's providing enough revenue for them and their families in a nice way. They have a good reputation. It's very sustainable the way it is. Maybe they've got their work hours down to a certain level. And some people are very happy there. And I'm not talking to those people because they like being there. But some people don't want to be there. They actually want to grow,
hmm
but they find it so hard to pull that trigger and say, I want to take that loan and go for the next step, or I want
hmm
to, I have the capital. I want to go hire 4 more people and grow. And it feels like the same predicament, just over at a different scale.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I would say, even though I am, like I said, risk averse to a certain extent, I still do struggle with a similar thoughts too, right? Because there are there are parts of your business where you might have to relinquish a bit of control. Let's say, like for the entire time, it's maybe perhaps been your baby, your brainchild, where you get to a point where if you start thinking about all these things, it's taking away from your ability to actually do your job. So you have to bring on some folks to kind of make that happen. You have to make sure that everything is kind of moving at a speed that makes sense to you. And if it's moving past that, there's got to be a way to scale it to a certain extent. For me, it's like, do I start working with more like other graphic designers who are more like freelancers, or folks that can kind of help my business from that perspective? It's still relinquishing a little bit of control on a much smaller scale than building up this massive workforce, but regardless, I think, of where you are and where your situation is and how big your business is, you're still going to have the same struggles, just perhaps, yeah, like you said, on a very different scale.
What are you struggling with right now? Is there any particular decision that you feel like you need to make, don't quite know how to make?
No, that is a good question. I would say what I just mentioned is something that I've been thinking about a little bit more lately. Like I said, I'm not looking to scale a massive business. I pride myself in creating like a situation and environment that is sustainable for myself and my clients, where my clients aren't hopefully aren't getting to a point where they're like, okay, well, we can tell this guy has so much work happening and our responses are getting delayed and our deadlines are getting pushed, because that never happens, and I pride myself on that. Whereas I can see how quickly and easily folks can kind of fall into a trap of, I need more business. Let's get as much business through the door as possible, get as many new clients in, just make sure that it's happening, and then we kind of go from there. I would say that's partially an area where I'm interested in exploring, is because I'm starting to meet like a certain threshold with my ability and my calendar being a certain level of packed. I want to see if there is a way where maybe I start to grow that slowly and slowly and slowly but surely, where maybe I work with more regular contractors and take some of that control away from me and put some of the design capabilities on other folks too. I I would say I'm definitely a perfectionist, and I have a hard time gonna not having the
Letting
reins of
go.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
When I used to consult in a previous business, and in the beginning it was just me. I started, it was just me doing the consulting. I had the standard predicament, which was this feast or famine thing, right? Like when there was a lot of work, there was just a lot of work, and then you'd get so busy doing the work that you weren't really, doing any sales, and then you'd all of a sudden be like, oh no, and now you had to kind of rush to fill that pipeline again. I've talked to a lot of freelancers, and it's not just in consulting, it's in your field of work, it's in a lot of work where you're effectively some version of self-employed. um, how do you deal with that in your business? Do you experience that, first of all?
Yeah, it's interesting because especially in the creative space, in the design space where I'm in more commonly, that is very prevalent. That kind of feast famine situation is it's something that you hear before you start your business, and you're like, okay, well, I'm not quite sure what that means. How is that gonna translate on my day to day? And then when you experience it, it does definitely throw a wrench through things. Especially in the design space, you end up kind of taking on a lot of these one-off projects. When people come to you for work, you take on those pieces, but afterwards it can be kind of radio silence, right? Not all clients require constant work. Some have designers in house. Some have like a network of freelancers and contractors that they dish work out to. It's not necessarily just you and that's it. I would say over the first year and a half to 2 years, I wouldn't say it was a feast or famine by any means, but it was a lot harder to kind of forecast. So what I've started to do in that sense is create a more sustainable business model for myself, but also for my clients too. I want to make sure that I can offer my services and have enough time where they can come to me at any time throughout the month and kind of work with me cohesively and meet their needs, and while I'm also meeting like a quota of my needs too. So it's just I've tried to figure out this relationship and formula that has taken a decent amount of time to figure out. But now that once I've got there, I'm not too concerned about the
Is
piece of
this a
famine.
formula for how much work, how many clients you can have at any time, or what's the formula for?
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely more of that like figuring out exactly how many hours you can devote to, say, creative work, how many hours you can devote to, say, like administrative work, what that means on a client to client basis. Notice how the clients that you do have are coming to you and the type of work that they need. See if there are ways where you can kind of offer more services, or at least more regular services. I think what you said before about folks who are starting their own business, they say like they're, like you said, like they're a cook or something like that. They notice that once they actually get into it, they're not actually doing the thing that they like.
Yeah.
I I think it's partially that, right? Like I didn't realize how much time I'm devoting to just regular
There's a business.
business operations stuff, and making sure that everything is moving as planned. Like I am a creative person. I like the doing of things. I like to create things. The administrative stuff does not come naturally to me. So what happens is like you have to figure out that formula. You have to understand how much time is needed, how much time has to be allocated between that stuff. You can't just rely heavily on the thing that you're good at. You have to do it all.
Right. Yeah. I remember I taught entrepreneurship for a little while at the university level, and I had a classroom full of students many times a week that their major was entrepreneurship. They had decided to
Mhm.
go to college to study entrepreneurship. And many of them, I was surprised, they would be well into their junior year and they wouldn't have started a business. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like, you're going to learn so much more by just doing. Just go out and start
Mhm.
any business and don't wait for the perfect business.
Yeah,
Whatever business you're going to start now is not going to be the one that's going to be your big hit. You know, it might be, you might get lucky, but just assume it's not. And don't wait for the perfect business idea. Just take any business idea because you're going to learn
Mhm.
so much more by going out there and doing stuff than you are by coming to my classroom. You know what I mean? There's only so
Totally.
much I could teach you theoretically and by example. The rest of it you kind of got to do for yourself.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. It's that's something that I've definitely struggled with. It's like you start a business based off of what you like and what you
Hmm.
enjoy, but you need to figure out those things that you don't know, the areas that you never even thought of. It's not going to happen until you actually do it. Like
Right.
I I've learned over this time of running my own business, like there are things in terms of like I don't know, something as simple as like finance and accounting and stuff like that. It wasn't something that was ever part of my brain when I was thinking about starting my own business and doing my own thing. And this is entirely just me. I'm not saying that this is the rule by any means, but I was not of the mind of thinking about like my accounting and how I'm going to file all my taxes and what
Yeah.
that means for all of these different things. It's a very minuscule example, but you don't know it until you do it, and then until you do it once or twice or three times you start understanding, okay, this is a regular rhythm that you can get in, and it's just something that happens naturally. It's not something I would have thought that I would have had an issue with or a challenge with. I just thought I was going to be designing fun stuff,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there you have
And
it.
it's not, that's just one tiny example, but there's a
Oh,
hundred of
exactly.
those tiny
Oh
examples,
my
and
goodness,
it ends
yeah.
up being death by a thousand cuts.
Totally. And fortunately that's not how it happened with me. And again, I think I am fortunate in the area that I am in the kind of industry that I'm in, because there is a lot of room for transformation. There are ways to change the types of things you're offering. There are so many different deliverables that I can provide. So it's not like I have to be pigeonholed into one
Sure.
route. So if things do change, and I mean, people can see technology changing every single day and how the design space is changing and all that kind of stuff. There are ways for me to pivot where I think in other industries it might be harder for sure.
I think the sum total of what you're saying is you don't know what you don't know, and you're not going to
Yeah,
find
totally.
out what you don't know until you start doing things, right?
Oh, absolutely. And for me, it's like I wanted to do this thing and I didn't really know what was gonna happen with it. By me just like ruminating and like seeing like the what ifs, I would never learn
Yeah.
that that's the case. And going back to my earlier point about kind of like the lie of everyone can do it, for me, like that was something that was helpful for me, is that like I was in a position to find that out. Like if I if things went south and I found that out,
You had an exit
that
path.
that was okay for me. Exactly.
It's really interesting too to me that let me see if I can get this thought back because it just escaped. But if well, I guess they'll have to cut it out and edit. I don't remember it, or it'll come back later. Anyway, actually, when you were talking about what you do, I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of a tour under the hood. I mean,
Okay, sure.
what are the services? What are the offerings? What is a lot of people who listen to this are entrepreneurs, and
Yeah.
so when they think about hiring creative, I belong to several entrepreneurship organizations, and one of the biggest values I found is you could go to somebody who's in an industry that you may want to hire and say, look, I'm not going to hire you, but educate me on what I should be looking for and what I should be expecting and what's too much to expect. And I found those conversations to be really valuable because it's like a crash course
Totally.
from someone who knows what you don't know, right? Like that's the key thing.
For sure, for sure. So I would say the two important things for me, and I can go into what I do after, but I think when you're talking to creatives, if you're talking to a designer or what have you, it doesn't matter what space they're in. What I've found that has helped me in my business, and when I'm looking for other contractors or looking for even it even works kind of on the inverse, right? Like it's like when I'm chatting to clients, I want to know if they have these certain values based off of what they're telling me, if that's something that I can take on based on their project. The first thing is I would make sure that you're finding more of like a specialist in more of in that space. So that is to say, if someone can say that they do absolutely everything in the creative space, they're probably not doing everything, or at least everything to 100%. And I say that from my own experience about how I've kind of evolved my business over time. Like in my experience, I always wanted to provide so many different services. I wanted to be everything to everybody because I wanted to get more business. I wanted to get more work. I wanted to meet new clients. And I wasn't going to do that if I just stuck with certain services.
What are the buckets in the creative space?
Yeah. I mean, so for me, like I'm a designer. I do a lot of creative work, whether that's like graphic design, digital design, or web design. So for me, I do a lot of like, when I say digital design, it's everything that's like virtual. So anything that you might see online, from like social media creative, ad creative, custom design projects, product branding and identity, some things that can also translate to kind of the physical in-person things, like web design. So that's like web design and development, responsive web design, understanding people's like user experience and user interface path. So everything that you might have on a website, it's not just the look and feel, it's how people engage and interact. Continuing for other services, like I do a lot of branding and identity. So making sure that some people that come to me, they have an established brand and they want me to help build some pieces off of it, or they want me to kind of update a look and feel to create some continuity. Some people come to me and they're like, I have no idea what the heck I'm doing. I don't have any idea of an identity. I have no idea of what the story is yet. So it's building it from like ground up. And then it's like, for me, because I was in the corporate space, one of the areas that I noticed that was kind of like a big opportunity for growth is honestly like slide deck support. There are so many people who present on a daily basis. They present to stakeholders, they present to other team members, they present to other teams across the board, and they don't have time to make this stuff look good or have a cohesive flow. And that's been a big area for growth for me, is like a lot of people have come to me and like, look, I need this to look great. There are some really important people who are looking at this content. Make it shine. Like I want to blow them away. So that was a huge piece for me. But like in the creative space, there's so many different areas, and there are a bunch of folks, if they're in the design space, odds are they have certain skills that carry over. So for example, I have experience in video and animation and that kind of stuff. I just don't offer them as services because I don't want to provide a service that I'm not fully comfortable with.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm like really hammering home the things that I'm fantastic at, and I know that I can provide that service to my clients. So that for me has been kind of the focus.
So find a specialist. It doesn't need to be like this person knows how to deal with, it's not super specialized, but some general bucket where you kind of can see a history, you can see proof of concept from their portfolio, and you know that they're competent at this particular area.
Exactly. It's like, what's the saying? It's like someone who does everything is like a master of none.
Do you know the full saying though?
No, I don't. Just came to my brain.
Jack of all trades, master of none. But then the rest of that saying goes on to say that you're still better off than just a master of one. Like, so that saying actually implies the inverse.
That's so funny. Okay, well, maybe you get what I'm saying. Maybe scratch
I
that.
do get what you're saying.
No, that's totally fine. But
I
to your
think
point, I'm
actually,
like,
just to dive into that, to not leave it hanging for the audience, I
no,
think
of
that goes
course.
to the concept of a T-shaped person. And a
Mhm.
T-shaped person, when it comes to competence, is somebody who has exposure and competence across a very broad area, but then has really deep competence in one area. And what you want to hire them
Totally.
for is that deep competence area, not all the other things, right? But because they understand all the other things, that means they make communication a lot easier. That means they get the context a lot easier. That means they're going to produce better work in faster time. But it's their specialty still that you should be focusing on when you're hiring them.
Exactly, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, right? Like, if you want to find a hyper niche specialist, definitely do that. Like, there are areas that I've worked in. If it's like healthcare communications, for example, that industry requires a certain type of person with a certain type of background. You can't just get anyone to pop in and understand and adequately communicate what they're talking about, because in most cases, if you're in healthcare communication, you need someone with somewhat of a science background. It's not just about the end deliverable. You need to have people that know what they're talking about. So that's totally fine. But for me, like, I have a background in communications. I have a master's degree in communications. So having that additional lens that can go across the different services I offer, it helps. But I'm not just offering a communications service. Like, I've specialized a little bit more into that design space, and I've taken all my experiences from my past, from my education, and I've built those services out to really empower my background, as opposed to, say, when I wanted to start this business, I was like, okay, well, let's do everything, and I'll bring my experience into it, but I'm not creating this like cohesive way to work, and there's no buckets.
How did you make that decision? Was it just between going back and forth with the market, eventually you landed on your specialty, or did you choose
Yeah,
at some point? How did you come to this clarity?
that's it's a good question, and I'm sure other folks would do things in other ways too. What I did was I noticed what clients want, like, plain and simple. Like, when folks come to me, they have a specific deliverable in mind. They don't necessarily have like this kind of like amorphous idea of how they want to improve their marketing. Some of the clients that I work with have that kind of approach, but I wouldn't say that's my like bread and butter. Most of the people that come to me, they have deliverables that they need out the door, and they need someone to get it done. So I've noticed, like, I can fill that gap where maybe they don't have a designer on staff and they need something done relatively quickly. So people can come to me and get their deliverable out there, and that's that. I noticed that a lot of that had been relatively like design heavy. A lot of folks do still want a lot of the web development and kind of like unique web experience as well. So I started focusing on that. I think a lot of people could also take the inverse path as well, and just be like, I want to do this, and that's what I'm doing. I want to make that work for me. And I'm not saying that that's incorrect by any means. That's just not the route that I would.
Let's talk. You talked about turning work around fast. You talked about people having a deliverable. I want to bring
Mm,
AI into this conversation
sure.
because I think I happen to believe that AI is going to severely multiply the number of jobs we have available for humans.
Hmm.
But the common narrative these days seems to be that it's going to take everybody's job away. As someone who's
Yeah.
in this field, as someone who's in a field where AI is kind of becoming very, very prevalent in many different ways and forms, I'd love to know your thoughts on your experience, and then I'd love to share my experience from
Please.
the person hiring rather than the person in the seat.
Totally. And it's something, anytime I ask, or anytime someone asks me about what I do, that's generally the first question that they ask me. They're like, so AI, what's going on there? How do you feel about your job security? To be completely honest, I mean, it's very apparent that AI is coming in strong, and there's a lot of development, and there will continue to be a lot of development. In terms of how it affects me and how I see it impacting at least what I do, I'm not gonna speak to the industry at large, because I think folks will have different opinions. I can really only just speak to my experience. But I've just found that it's something that you can work with, not be impacted by. There are so many different uses of AI at the moment, and it's not doing everything at 100% yet at the moment. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of my clients, one, some are just actively against like creative work that's developed through AI, whether that is say like social media posts or any imagery or anything like that. So there are a lot of companies that just have an outright values based decision on AI. The second is that people just don't have the time to like create all these prompts and like try and figure out how AI is working for their business. Like their bosses and their bosses aren't letting them sit there and tinker around with AI to figure out if it's going to work or if this has any impact on how they're seen in the market or how this will impact their day to day from a creative perspective, like a creative deliverable output perspective. So instead, people are just like, I need someone who actually understands my brand and someone who understands the day to day aspect, the audience, everything like that, and that it just continues on. All the AI is doing on the side is maybe improving perhaps some of the copy that's associated with that content. It's improving how quickly they can schedule things out, how quickly like it's making the process a lot easier. But when it comes down to the actual physical deliverable, from my experience, my clients aren't looking for the AI response. They're looking for the human response who's worked with them for years, the human response who's like an extension of their team. They want something that's developed because they know this person already knows their brand in and out.
So this aligns with my experience as someone who's hired folks. And I've even said to folks, I was like, I'm very comfortable with you using AI to achieve your deliverable.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to, I encourage it. And where I think it doesn't feel good is if somebody has a price and then they literally just go to an AI tool and just give you whatever that AI tool outputted. And they're like, here you go. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing that it used to cost when I used to do it all. That is not what anybody's after, right? It's kind of like the kid who passes the test by saying, hey, ChatGPT, write me an essay on, right?
Exactly.
Like, no value is added to the world to that individual in that case. But when I find a designer or whatever field we're working in, and they're like, I know how to use all the AI tools. I've spent the last, I'm continuously learning all the new ones because they're changing so fast. And I can do something that I would not have been able to do for you a year ago without it being completely cost prohibitive. I can now do it for you and it'll be within your budget and it'll be awesome. It'll be 10 times better than what I could have done without the AI. And I'm like, great, you can have my money because now that's an investment, right? Now that's a return on investment that you're actually getting rather than somebody like literally just using a tool. It's you don't pay for the hammer, you pay for the carpenter who knows how to use the hammer. You know what I mean? But that doesn't mean that I want my carpenter to put all the nails in with his shoe. Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I actually love that analogy because it is true. Like when people say, oh, like AI is going to take over your job or AI is going to take over the creative space, like I would dare someone to try and create the content with purely AI alone.
Mm-hmm.
I think you would be surprised at the level of quality that you cannot get if you have in your in your example a whole carpenter who is doing this thing, in this case a designer who's overseeing the whole process. What I think people need to kind of understand, or at least how to approach AI from a creative perspective, is understand how AI can improve the process, and it's on the creator or the designer to adjust and pivot accordingly.
Right.
For example, like using a similar analogy, it's like in like web design, there are so many different avenues that you can go now. There are so many different like pre-built websites that you can use. Like there's so many. But what a lot of companies are doing they're introducing AI in a way that just streamlines the workflow. So like Figma, for example, you can utilize AI to improve how your sites are built. You can improve how assets are created or how they respond. It's not going to completely take over your process, but it's up to the designer to utilize those tools and make sure that they're being utilized correctly and with the benefit of time, right? It's not going to completely take the designer out of the picture, especially if they're just understanding how to utilize it.
I think there's somebody out there, and I want to talk to them because I hear them saying, well, Travis, you're right. It's not good enough now, but if we keep training it and we keep giving it, then eventually it'll replace you altogether. And my response to that is as follows. I've never known human ambition to go down over time. So I think the more capability our tools have, the greater our ambitions will become. And so the human will still need to be required to manage the more competent tools in order to achieve the greater, more ambitious things. And the other side of that argument is when photography was invented, a certain kind of drawing went away, a certain kind of very technical drawing kind of was demoted in the field of art. But it gave rise to Impressionism. It gave rise to surrealism. It gave rise to all these other ways of an artist expressing themselves and connecting with their audience that simply capturing somebody's portrait in a very technically and accurately correct way couldn't. And the other thing that happened is only the very wealthy could afford to have their family drawn up once a year and be put on a mantle, right? But now with a photograph, you see that, you know, geez, my kids have one of the most best documented childhoods ever because it's the invention of the iPhone. And it's just, nobody has to pay for film anymore. Nobody has to develop it anymore. Nobody has to put them in albums anymore. And so it's just proliferated the amount of photography. So I don't know. I can't see the case for an AI doomsday when it comes to labor.
I agree. And I feel like a lot of the conversation around AI is like very zero sum when it comes to people. It's always like AI is in one bucket, humans are in another bucket, and it's always, there's always a fight between the two. But no one thinks like that, and technology, in my opinion, doesn't develop in that way. That like something that is sorely missing is like the temporal aspect, right? Like there is time that happens as things develop, and humans are developing also alongside AI. Like you said, with different technologies. Like to put it in terms of like my field, would I be using Microsoft Paint right now to deliver all my deliverables? No, because the Adobe Creative Suite has been introduced and has kind of evolved the game as we go. It didn't take over jobs. Designers and creatives had to just learn how to utilize it, and it's improved their ability to provide and deliver really unique pieces of creative work. Similarly to like when Photoshop, for example, introduced a lot of AI tools like generative AI and imagery, in the same way that like removing something from the background 10 years ago, you'd go in by hand and you really work through it and figure it out. Now you can just like circle it and boom, it's gone.
Person's gone. Yeah.
That doesn't mean that like, oh my gosh, it's doomsday for AI. It means I can work quicker. It means I don't need to put time into removing that piece. I just remove that piece. Let's move on to the next task, right?
Yeah. I feel like that's the story of human history. One area where I hesitate is the speed of the transition, because almost as technology accelerates, it feels like the changes happen faster and faster. If you think about the agricultural revolution, it probably took 10,000 years to get to 80% adoption. I don't know if that number is correct, but you can imagine the time scale, right? Like how long before there were really not a lot of hunters and gatherers left. When we think about the Industrial Revolution, that time frame goes back to maybe like about 200 years, right? Like for the time from that invention to high level of adoption.
Happen quick.
So now we're talking about the Information Revolution, which probably started during World War II, right? With the invention of the transistor and the turning machine to decode the Nazi cryptography, right? So that kind of gives birth to the Information Revolution, which then eventually leads to the PC, which leads to the internet, which leads to AI, which leads to where we are. The time scale that transition is going to take place and how quickly it's going to touch 80% of the people on this planet feels much, much faster than anything that we've known in history. So this is almost more of a call to action to people to embrace it, because I think the more you resist it, the harder it's going to be to join later, because you need to kind of do your best to stay with it and learn the tools and use the tools and not be scared of them. Because if you do that, there's jobs, right? If you're trying to use the tools, I know there's somebody out there who's going, I don't have the time to learn this tool. I need a thing. Can I hire you to do it? I guarantee that for anybody out there, that if you know how to use a few AI tools very well, you will be able to find other people who need you to use them for them. But if you're, holding on to the old ways and resisting and saying, I don't do any of that, I think the time that it takes for you to become obsolete is only going to be faster in today's world than it would have been 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like I think there's a lot of folks who look at AI as like a thing that's kind of encroaching on their space. It's taking, or at the very least, it's not like the pure way to do things. Like there are like very puritanical like designers or creatives.
I think those are different things. Yes, but they're both
true. Exactly. And what I would argue is like just because AI exists doesn't mean that you have to ignore it completely or like put your head in the sand, pretend it doesn't exist, anything like that. It's just a matter of how you use it and understand it. If you can use it and understand it, you're just being carried along the journey as easily as it's being developed. A good example, like I remember going when I was in college this was 2010 to 2012. I was learning how to code and design websites on Adobe Dreamweaver, which I'm honestly not even sure if it exists anymore because it's just not something I've even looked at. If you were to tell me in 2026 that someone was still utilizing that just because they are that's how they've done it and that's how they've always done it, that would be insane. Like we have Figma now, we have Adobe XD, we have all of these things that help develop and design websites, in this case, quickly. That's just something that you've evolved to understand in the industry. If you don't utilize those tools or understand how that's happening, yeah, you're going to get left behind. And it's not to say that AI is the culprit. You also have the onus as a professional to continuously improve your craft and to improve what you do, to continuously learn. Like if you're not learning, you're just going to be relatively stagnant regardless of what it is. Like take AI out of the picture anyways, that's the same thing still applies.
So in one of the examples you pointed out the purist, and I think there's an emotional motivation there. And then the other one you pointed out and I think you used the right term about zero-sum game, which then inspires fear, right? And so people are really kind of coming back and being like, well, what about me? I'm going to be left without it. So it's a response from fear, which just like any response from fear, I think what you have to do is face it and think about it and dispel it, you know what I mean? And then ask yourself, and so what? So if it came true, what would you have to do afterwards, right? So you have to confront that fear. To take the purist form for a second, every so often in my house, we'll make bread from scratch. You know what I mean? And most of the time we buy bread and we make sandwiches with it and whatever. But every so often there's just something really rewarding about saying, we're going to put flour on the counter and we're going to make a mess, right? But we're going to make some homemade bread and it's going to taste delicious and it's going to come out of the oven hot and warm and we're going to eat it right there and there. So to the purist, I think there is value in maintaining some of that essence. It just does not need to be everything, right? It's not an all or nothing game. There's a time and a place and you can see all the gains and you can do the efficient thing in 90% of the space. And then for that thing that you really enjoy, that you really connect with, that's where you should focus some of that other energy, some of that human energy that you don't want to make more efficient. Like that's not the point.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I think that's something that people need to kind of even like the creative folks maybe need to, I mean, who am I to say need to think about it? They're already thinking about it. Like this is something that they're already doing. Like that just is what it is. But just, I guess maybe the general zeitgeist around AI, like people just need to understand, like there is also a massive demand for people creating things themselves and creating things like by their own hands. Like one of the distinctions that I like to make as well as a designer is I would not consider myself like a digital artist. When I say like digital artists, you see people creating all this beautiful artwork, all this like imagery, all this stuff, whether that's like they're like I've seen people going through a forest with a portable scanner to take scans of leaves to use as a texture on some piece of artwork. Yeah. Like really cool stuff. That's not what I do. And what I do is really just help businesses get their communication out in a visual means. Yeah. For me, I'm not as focused on kind of like the digital art in and of itself, but that's not to say like AI is just going to remove that demand or need or even human desire to do it. Like I still want to see all the digital art, the non-digital art, anything that's created by humans still to exist, and it can exist in the same space. It just doesn't need to be like put up against AI all the time.
I want to unpack a little bit of that example, because the concept of art versus design, the concept of creative versus artistic, like it strikes me that the way you're describing yourself, you're to some degree, you're saying, I am a technician of digital tools, expertise, knowledge, background, and I know how to take that stuff, and I have enough exposure to art and to my own taste and to experience of what works in the marketplace, and I can bring that together and I can give you a deliverable, which is driven by a client wanting a deliverable, and something that is more artistic, which oftentimes tends to be for the pursuit of the art itself, right? For the exploration and the journey of the art itself, which is not necessarily a market force driven thing. It is more an inward reflection. It is, I don't know. I don't claim to have a good definition of art, but as somebody who considers themselves creative, but not necessarily artistic, and when I come across artists, I kind of see that difference clearly. I'm like, oh, you're in this for something different, right? You're not just trying to solve a problem. I don't know if I just used the word just. So I don't know if that means that I'm putting it at a higher plane or not, but I feel some of the artists I know, they need to suffer for their art. And if they're not undergoing that deep introspective suffering, then they don't value whatever comes out the other side, which is the exact opposite of what I try to do when I try to solve a problem for a customer, right? I try to make the experience as enjoyable as possible, as easy as possible.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think there is absolutely something that needs to be distinguished between the two. And maybe people come at me for this kind of approach, but that's totally fine. Yeah, I personally don't consider myself like an artist. And I've never considered myself that in this line of work. It's not to say that I'm not capable of doing that. That's just not my focus. Like, and I've had conversations with like younger designers or younger creatives, and when they ask me about this kind of stuff, the first thing that I will say is like, if you are like chained to your creative expression, and you're working in a space, especially that's more corporate focused, which is what I am doing, you're going to have like an identity crisis. At the very least, you're going to have a creative crisis, because what you're trying to provide to the client just isn't going to meet that kind of need on both sides. Not to say that there aren't clients out there that are looking for that kind of artistic kind of focus, but like I said before, if I'm super generalized, or if I'm super specific, that's very niche. It's going to be a very niche client that you're looking for. It's going to be a lot harder to find continuous work. So for me, I don't consider myself that artist, because what I do is I'm in the same way, like you said, that you're helping make things easier for your clients, make things more streamlined, efficient, like happier, healthier, like make that process better. That's exactly what I try to do. I'm just using a different medium, right? Like I'm just using a visual creative medium to get that job done for them. Yeah. if they were looking for a graphic artist, I'd probably direct them elsewhere because that's not my focus.
I've commissioned one piece of art in my life. And I'm reflecting on the process because of what you just said. And so I was scrolling through some online site where they had different artists. Actually, I don't even know how I came across it, but there was an image and it just reminded me of my son. And so I bought that image from the artist. It's up in my house today. And then I was like, I want one that reminds me of my daughter. Right.
Cool.
So I went looking through her stuff and I found one, but it had already sold. And so I said to her, this image, I said, I bought this one because it reminded me of my son. This image right here reminds me of my daughter, but I know you already sold it. Can you create something, at your discretion? You know what I mean? Here's a little bit about her. Here's whatever. Can you create something that really, you think fits that bill? And she did, right? And it worked. It's a wonderful painting. I still like the one I didn't buy better, I have to say. But at that moment, what I did is I trusted. I didn't buy the one that was already sold, just to be clear. I would have bought it if I could have. But at that moment, I trusted her taste. I trusted her artistic expression. She had already put enough of that out on display that I was like, I don't want to choose. I want you to choose. And that's what I was actually hiring her for. And I think when I've hired people for creative stuff in work, they feel like that I'm hiring them to choose. And it's like, no, I still want to choose. I'll take your advice. I want your options. I want direction from you. But at the end of the day, it's my business. It's my brand. It's my project. I need to be the one to make the choice because I understand all the criteria. And that's a big, I think the identity crisis is the perfect word.
Exactly. And it's exactly what I try and do as well. It's like, I pride myself on getting the design and the creative that the client wants because they know their brand best. They don't come to me necessarily for like my like a certain style, for example, like that artist like you went to for those images. What they come to me for is I have really good quality designs and they know that I can not only meet but exceed their expectations on what they see for their brand. The difference between like the artist and me in a creative space is I have specific boundaries that I have to stay within. Like the reasons why certain brands exist is not just because someone decided it. Generally, there are boards of directors, there are managers, there are like CEOs that have not only are actively putting their feedback into the brand and how things are developed, but they approve these things down the road. And for me, I love what I do is because you have to take some sort of like an idea of your creativity or your type of creative work or stuff like that, and just like kind of remove any of that and I just focus on what they actually need, and that's what works for me.
Yeah.
You can go to artists for everything and anything really, and they will do what they want to do, and that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. That's just not the name of the game for me.
Right. If you wouldn't mind, I'd love for you to kind of take us back in time. Like, where'd you get your start? Like, where'd you grow up? Did you have siblings? Like, what was that like? And tell us a little bit about your journey, about how you got here.
Yeah, no, that's really funny. It was a long journey as to where I got here, especially from like professionally. It took a couple of twists and turns for sure. Going way back, so I grew up in kind of like rural Ontario. So for folks listening, if you know where Toronto is, I grew up basically an hour north, a small town called Keswick. Very small, near a lake. There was only like when I was growing up, there was one high school. That was that. It expanded to perhaps two. And
how many kids in your graduating class? That's usually the measure that people say.
No, that's a good question. It's funny. I don't actually know the number, but I get into this conversation often with my partner too, because her school, she went to a school in kind of like rural Ontario as well, but it was a French school, so the numbers were like way lower. So she's always like, it was never as small as my school. So I actually don't know, but still big enough because we were relatively close to Toronto, so you get a lot of folks who were kind of commuting from the Keswick area to Toronto. So a lot of people moved out that way, had families, but still kind of lived in the city. So it was still close enough that you could work in a big city, but kind of get away from it. So it wasn't as small as some places. But I mean, like at a young age, I've always been interested in like creative stuff. Like me, I have an older brother. We've both been like really interested in like film and movies, and that's where my brother, funny enough, that's his industry where he works. And we've always been interested in like creative stuff, but it wasn't until really like high school where we had this one class. It was called communications technology, that like I think things started to like click in my brain, like the wheels started to turn a little bit. I've never been a very studious person when it comes to like school. Or at least I wasn't when I was in like grade school, high school, all that kind of stuff. But we had this one class where I was introduced to kind of like the entire gamut of the creative space, like sound design, graphic design, like video production. We were able to create little commercials. Like I started to use Photoshop in like grade 10. And I was like, wow, I'm actually pretty good at this. Like it's something that came relatively easily. And I'm like, when you hear folks talking about how like math comes easy to them, never understood it, never got it. I never had something come like very intuitively in that regard. Whereas like this, I was just able to do it, and like the pathways were connecting, so it made a lot of sense. So after high school, I went to university for a brief spell, realized it was something that I absolutely did not want to do. So then I left and went to a college. So here in Canada, we have universities and we have colleges. Universities are more like the academic, and colleges are more like the technical hands-on skills. So I decided to leave university. I went to college for 2 years in London, Ontario. So I went to a school called Fanshawe College, and they had a very technical creative program, multimedia design and production, very similar to the class that I had in high school, where I could do everything. I was doing animation, I was doing web design and development, I was doing graphic design, all that kind of stuff. So that was amazing. Really enjoyed it. I will always say, if someone asks me what is the most important education that you had in my career, I always will say that college, because it gave me the technical foundation to do everything that I do now. Which is funny, because after that I went to university because I wanted to make sure that I had opportunities
it's a
more broadly
thing.
Yeah, exactly. Just like because I wanted to give myself the opportunity to kind of move around in different levels of, say, like management or different spaces, and I didn't want to just be confined as like, you are the graphic designer, that is that. I wanted, and it's not to say that that's the route that people go, or that's always what happens, but for me, I was also very young. I didn't, like, the whole world was in front of me. I didn't want to just confine myself to one specific thing. So I ended up going to university. I did like an extended, or like a condensed program.
Is it additive in Canada? Like if you finish college, does that count towards?
Yeah, so it depends on how you go about it, and the type of education that you had. For me, so I went to the University of Toronto, more towards like a stereotypical kind of like social sciences, arts kind of degree. I didn't really do anything in terms of like design or marketing.
You went to a different.
It's not so much that it was not related. It's just my focus was more towards like the communication and the critical thinking and that kind of stuff, because in my college education it was very technical, hands-on, whereas I wanted something that I would use like the other part of my brain and then merge them together. So I did that for 3 years, and then I started working in marketing. And then I quickly realized, like, maybe I want to go back to college or go to school again. Because again, I was like, well, I'm not quite sure where where the path will take me. Again, I graduated in like 2015.
What'd you go back for the second time?
So the second time, so I did my master's. So I went
Okay.
in 2017 to 2018. I did my master's in communication.
Okay.
So it sounds like a roundabout way to get there, but the reason
No, no,
why I went
it makes sense to me. Yeah.
okay, great. That's awesome. The reason why I did my master's because it's like it was quite literally a combination of both. So in my master's degree, I was able to utilize my critical thinking skills, but also do it in a way that's like I could utilize my hands-on creative technical skills. There was a lot of opportunity to like not only like create content, but like talk about it and have like a fulsome approach to the creative process, not just the design aspect, not just the ideation process aspect, and not just like the written word aspect of it all. I could like mush it all together, and it
And I
worked
think when you
fantastically.
have all that context, it makes what you do more powerful, right? Because you just know all the different elements. It's kind of, I know how to build a wall, but I also know why the wall is there. And I also know about the electrical system that has to run through the wall. And so it just gives you, it's that T-shaped person again, right? Like
Hmm.
it's that broader exposure to all those other areas that are relevant for what you do.
Yeah, you got it. And I'm not sure about you, but for me, I always get there's always an underlying level of anxiety if I don't understand at least a little bit of something. So maybe that's just like in my personality, but that's
For me, that turns into excitement, not anxiety. I'm like, oh, cool, I get to
okay.
learn something new. Like I know nothing
Interesting.
about this.
I should really reframe it that way. So yeah, so like I put all that education together, and like obviously interspersed throughout all of those different schools I was working in terms of where I went after my master's, because that was the latest degree. I actually worked in a hospital, which was one of the best jobs I've ever had. I worked in the like public relations and like corporate affairs and media relations team for a hospital system in Toronto. I had such a good time. I was learning about really fantastic, like groundbreaking technological research that was happening in like Alzheimer's and like anything that has to do with the brain, or like really, really, really amazing stuff. But I was approaching it from like a creative and like media perspective. So I was writing stories about it. I was designing promotional material for it. I was liaising with like news outlets to promote stories about it. So like although it was a scientific technical space, I found myself right at home in terms of like my experience, and I was able to bridge it all together. Um, After that, I left for a tech company. I thought I would kind of give myself a bit of a challenge, try something kind of new in terms of like the technical space. Like at that time, like the cloud was becoming a very massive part of society. So I wanted to see how that worked.
What were
Did
you
that.
guys building?
So it was like it was basically just like a whole lot of like SaaS stuff based off the cloud, like platform as a service stuff based off the cloud. Like it was all that kind of space. And I was more of like just the marketing specialist for it. So I was helping develop the brand. I was helping promote the products, all that kind of stuff. And then COVID hit. So I switched gears, and I started working, and this was the last job that I worked at before I started my own business. I was working for an engineering and professional services firm, and I worked there for a good couple of years.
So you never worked for an agency per se. Like all of
Yeah,
your experience was in a domain, doing something specific, and learning more deeply those industries, rather than kind of, if you were an agency, you might imagine kind of getting exposure to more
you
things,
got it.
but not at the same depth.
Yeah, you got it. And it's probably a very maybe unlikely is not the right word, but perhaps unlikely path, because I imagine there are a lot of folks who are in the creative space who come from kind of like an agency background, who are comfortable working with a variety of different clients, who are comfortable working with these like always moving timelines and moving parts, just by nature of how the agency world is. I never had that experience, and that's why I don't look at that as something that's necessarily a negative thing. I utilize that experience as a strength because, like I said, my focus is on helping businesses. Like my focus is on helping sometimes larger corporations with all of their creative needs. I understand how stakeholders work in these
Yeah.
businesses. I understand the guardrails. I understand the limitations that these companies have. So I'm like uniquely positioned to help because not because I haven't been in an agency, but because I've been there.
Because you
Right?
understand the organizational structures, you understand the politics,
Exactly.
you understand when somebody hires you, you understand what they get measured on. You understand what
Exactly.
success is for them, which is ultimately a superpower, right? And you
Yeah.
wouldn't have had that if you were a generalist and didn't have those deep dives in your career.
100%, 100%, and that's not to say that there is one right or wrong pathway, and I'm sure people can succeed in the same way. That's just what I bring to the table, and
Yeah.
that's what I think. That's why I think a lot of people come back to me as well because I have that understanding.
So you said you and your brother are both in these creative fields.
Yeah.
Was there something going on at home with the way mom and dad kind of what they valued, what they displayed, what they did that prioritized this creative side of the brain or this creative side of life?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's really funny. So when I was younger, my dad, who's passed away, he passed away a number of years ago. But when we were growing up, one of my fondest memories is like he always used to record videos, like back in the VHS days, and he had this massive library of
Yeah.
videos, like VHS, but not only on each VHS, there would be like little scribbles of what is on there. So there'd be like four different films on a singular VHS tape. And I kid you not, there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these. So back in the day, we used to just pull a VHS, pop it in, and just see what was on it.
Was it
Sometimes it
home
was like
movies or was it stuff he'd record off the TV or?
it'd be stuff like he'd record. Like some days we'd get like a like a football match from the 90s, like a Buffalo Bills game. The next we'd get like I don't even know, like Top Gun or something, right? So
What
we
What a
yeah.
treasure trove. What a great way to remember him. Do you still have all of them?
Honestly, I have no idea what happened. Like to be completely honest, my brother is very much the type of person who like keeps like old technology. Like
Yeah, yeah.
he has all our old video game systems. He has like everything that we've had in the past. He's got incredible like DVD collection. Like
Yeah.
it would rival like a blockbuster or something, right? But I don't know what happened to those ones. Surely they're like in like
They're
stores or something.
somewhere. They're
I don't
somewhere.
even have a VHS player anymore, so I couldn't even watch them if I tried.
So let me start with a little bit about Routine Rebels brand. So I have a history of naming things in this kind of way that they're oxymorons, where the two words in the title kind of make no sense together, but they're kind of opposite of each other. So Routine Rebel was just a word that just came to me at some point. And what it meant to me was this dichotomy between making your life better by kind of rebelling against your routine, right? And then the other one was by improving your routine, making your life better and having greater fulfillment, right? But by actually changing the routine, but still embracing the concept of a routine. And I honestly have a love-hate relationship with routines. I feel like as a middle-aged man, refining my routine has it become an art form, if that resonates with anybody out there. But I also kind of let myself off of it sometimes, and I'm like, nope, too much monotony, too much. But in order to get a lot done, it's really helpful to have these structures and these things, and not only just get a lot done, but make it enjoyable to do them. You know what I mean? Because and that's always been my guide. When my routine starts to feel stale and I'm not enjoying it anymore, I'm like, it's time to refresh what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. Routine Rebel also came at a time in my life where I was really burnt out from my last company. And the logo as it currently stands is a phoenix inside a flame. And so this phoenix has been kind of crying out louder and louder to me lately, because as I'm realizing what we're here to do, that phoenix kind of is taking center stage for me. And so what we're here to do, I think, is help people transform their identity. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who want a happier, more fulfilled life. They're achieving success on paper, but it just doesn't feel successful. They're falling behind in other areas of their life. Or they feel lost. They don't just quite know how to get that next level of success or happiness or fulfillment that they're after. And fundamentally, we cannot do the work for them. I can't do that work for you. You can't do that work for me. All of us have to do that work for ourselves. But what we can do is we can create environments and we can help them transform their identity. So when they start to see themselves differently, they will start to behave differently. They will start to make decisions differently. And so they will have the life that the person they want to be has. And so our job is to help them see themselves as the person they want to be and not the person they currently are. In order to do this, we have to meet them where their identity currently is. So if there's somebody out there saying, I'm a struggling young woman inside a family business and I want to have a bigger leadership position and I don't feel like I'm getting the chance. Or if there's somebody out there going, we're a couple and we run a business together, and man, the lines between our marriage and our family they're just always in the way and it's not very fulfilling. or any particular pain area where people identify that that's how they see themselves. We want to help them be that phoenix in the fire, right? We want to help them kind of see themselves that second life which is really just a return to them, right? Really just a return to the version of themselves that is joyous and happy and playful and energetic and adventurous, but anew, right? Because that old version got them to where they are, and now they need to kind of reinvent without letting go of kind of their essence. And that's really what we're here to do. So if I share that with you as our brand, like, where would you go from there?
Honestly, it's really interesting because I feel like I'm also pretty strongly aligned with how you're approaching your business and how I'm approaching my business too, because in the same way that you're helping folks get from kind of where they want to be to where they are, that's also what my goal is as well. I want to get people to they have a creative idea, something that they might want. It could be more of a general idea. It might be an actual like deliverable that they might want, but they're not there yet. So how do I get them there? So I'm right on board with that. So based off of everything that you provided based off of the brand, I mean, there's a whole whack of things that we can do. Like whenever I ask my clients more about the project or whatever they're coming to me with, sometimes it, like I said, maybe they're just coming because they're like, you know what, my social media, it's not hitting as hard, or my website looks like it was built in the early 2000s. I need to make this thing like modernized. Like it could be something more general where it's kind of like outcomes based in terms of like better leads, better brand recognition, better what have you. So that's more of a larger idea. But there's also some of the smaller, like more specific targets where people come to me with like actual tangible pieces. Like I need a better website. So I would, if I was to look to your business, I would look in terms of like, well, what are you hoping to do with that? Like you have this idea, and you're providing such rich imagery. You have a rich story. What do we want to do with that? Do we want to create more of a brand around it? Do we want to really hone the brand appeal of your business? Do we want to like do something that gets that word out specifically about like an initiative or something like that? That's where I would immediately start, because I want an overview of the business, but I want an overview of like your primary objective. Like, what are your goals? What is your context? What is your background? What does like the question that I will ask everyone is like, what does success look like to you? Everyone has a different idea of success. Every project has a different idea of success and metrics that accompany.
So to state it very plainly, the how of what we do, right? Because that's where we go into implementation. So what we want to do is we want to identify as many of these niches as possible, and we'll go slow over time, right? There's only a certain speed we can go with. And for each of these niches, we want to develop a 30-day challenge. We want to keep the pricing of that 30-day challenge really affordable, and we want to keep it to 30 days and maybe just a half hour or an hour of work a day because it's doable. And we feel that the people out there who see this pain point and recognize and connect with it will do the work and they'll be invested in it. The point of the challenge is to create clarity and action plan around, and maybe even the beginning of action around the transformation that needs to take place. Like, where are my gaps? Where is it? Who is it that I do want to be? Why am I not that person? What's getting in the way? And then what can I start doing to start plugging some of these gaps? And if we haven't done that in 30 days, then I would say we've failed. But if we have done that in 30 days, then I think we will leave that person with a choice, which is, do you want to now take this action plan and go do it on your own? Or do you want to do it as part of a cohort of people, as part of a community of people who are undergoing this same transformation with you? And is that additional support and the support of whoever's leading that community valuable to you in your transformation? Are you more likely to do it because you're inspired and surrounded by people? My guess is that most people will be and will want that. And so then we have an obligation to keep these communities, these cohorts around these. We're calling them chapters, actually. These are chapters of the Routine Rebel community, to keep these chapters around for people to help them actually undergo that transformation. And then whether they stay in that chapter or whether they find a different transformation later in their life that they want to be part of, we would hope that they would be part of the Routine Rebel community for a long time. And we would do stuff like go on adventures together and just do things that continue to reinforce that we're all human beings, we're all entrepreneurs who are undergoing transformation. And I think that's the difference between Routine Rebel and other entrepreneurial organizations, which are wonderful, by the way. I have nothing bad to say about any of them. They all add value. Most of them are focused on the transformation of the business. Routine Rebel is here to focus on the transformation of the entrepreneur to that more fulfilled, higher quality of life, greater satisfaction, greater life satisfaction. The tangible ask is, what can we do to get people into these 30-day challenges? I don't think we have a problem around creating them. There's a lot of really talented people on the team who've been through those changes. There's a lot of people on the team who've designed experiences before. I'm not worried about any of that. But how do we get the word out? How do we create copy, ads, social media content that really drive people to say, yeah, I want to do this challenge?
Yeah, for sure. So coming from my perspective, so because I do more design and creative stuff, I do intersperse a little bit of marketing through there, because to me it sounds like your unique challenge that you want to tackle is quite holistic. There is a lot of different moving parts. There are different things that you would need involved to make that happen. Obviously the communication and getting the word out is kind of the end goal. So where I would come in is like building that foundation for you to have. So it's less about communicating it to your audience. I want to make sure that you're ready to go when you do communicate that to your audience. So the way that I like to approach things is quite literally from a timeline or like a common thread approach. So understanding all the different moving parts that you have, and then we would tackle each of those moving parts together. So like you said, you have those like different what was the word that you referred to it? It was like the 30-day
the challenge, or the
yeah, like it was a challenge. But did you have like some sort of like piece of collateral or like a book type thing, or was it just like a web page? The
challenges happen as a cohort. So we basically recruit people, and we all start on the same day, and we go 30 days together. And the ones we've designed so far, which is our hypothesis that they'll all kind of look something like this, is there's 1 week focused on mindset, right? The changes that need to happen kind of up here. There's 1 week focused on health and vitality, which are the changes that need to happen in the body. Because so much of who we are, like we tend to stay in our heads, but we have hearts, we have bodies, and you have to start to move all of them and change all of them so that you can see yourself in a different way. I have a friend who said, the last time my business was doing awesome was when I was really fit and working out. And when I stopped working out, that's when the business started to suffer. And now that I'm starting to get my own health routine in check again, the business is starting to respond. And so it's when we take care of ourselves, I think, and the body's an important way. We tend to see better results in the things we do and how we apply ourselves. So a week focused on mindset, a week focused on health and vitality, a week focused on wealth and work, the actual application of ourselves to the thing that we're doing, and also how we think about wealth. So many of us are driven by scarcity as opposed to being driven by abundance, and those fears and some of that stuff. And then the last week focused on love and relationships. And I don't just mean that with like family life, which is an important part of that week, but also how you relate to your employees. If you have business partners, if you're in that niche where we were talking about young women in a family business, or a couple running a business together, you can imagine how much that week is how complicated that week can get and how much you have to unpack there about your things. So the experience is a 30-day experience. We're doing one that has in-person components right now, and we're doing one that has only virtual components. But everybody gets like a daily voice drop. There's a discussion forum. They get a written assignment or some instructions for whatever the assignment is they're going to do. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that's the sum total. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. So what I would say then in this case is, if I were to approach your business in this perspective from a design and creative perspective, I would look at all the pieces that you need to communicate that out to your audience before you're actually sharing that. So, for example, have you developed landing pages for this content that outlines what you just told me? We would need to understand the why behind it, and that needs to be communicated to your audience in a way that would actually pull them.
One of the hardest parts is the duration, right? It's if you're talking to someone, you can go back and forth and make sure that you've connected with them and they've understood, your intention. But when you get a third of a second of somebody's time as they're scanning your page, that headline has to hit them. That, you know what I mean? That, and then you have to kind of unpack the data in increasingly more detail, because if they're interested, you want there to be more. But if you try to give them all up front, I would tune out, right? So
100%. And that is the beauty of design and user experience, right? You want to make sure that people are getting the information that they need, not the information that is helpful. If you were to go a landing page route, for example, whether it is this example or any other example, a lot of people tend to want to jam content on the page because they want to show how important it is. But at the same time, think about how many people are scrolling on their phones, how many notifications they're getting, how much time it takes them to get down to a bottom of a page. It's not realistic. So instead, we could develop a workshop where we're creating these individual pages with specific headers, how much space that header takes up on your mobile device, on your desktop. All of this is taken into account. Everything is very calculated. It's not, things don't just happen by happenstance and that they're up there because they're up there. No, it's because generally there is a general kind of client journey that people are going down once they land on a website in this case. So we would have to look at what are those important messages? What are those key takeaways that you can hammer into a hero section of a web page, the kind of the body section of the web page, and how do we create an important hierarchy of information as well? As much as people think about creative deliverables as a final piece, everything that I try and do tells a story. It has to have some sort of cohesive narrative to get people in. A lot of things online these days, and I mean, especially if you're thinking about courses and having people buy into what you're doing, you need to differentiate yourself between other people as well. So making sure that messaging is cohesive, but also visually appealing. That's where I like to come in and try and make some sort of relationship with, because
So I
you
love
need
I love
the
the
two.
clarification of a landing page because it's a single deliverable. It's got an objective, it's got a business objective. It's easy to measure whether it's working or not. There's probably
Hmm.
another one, which is how do we drive traffic to the landing page? But if we just think about the landing page, right, that's a
Exactly.
really clear deliver. So what would that process look like for us if we wanted to work together? Would you go off and say, here's a bunch of
Yeah.
options, or would you interview people on our team, or how would it work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So every client's different, and depending on a variety of different kind of moving components within their project, for example. So um, if I've had clients who come to me and they need a completely new website, for example, that gives me kind of like a blank slate to do whatever I want. However, there I have had some clients who've come to me where they have a lot of existing material and they need a single landing page within that existing material. So we're asking a question of, am I creating something that is new? Because if I'm creating something that's brand new, I need to consider things like brand. I need to consider things like color scheme. I need to think of things like assets, new assets, imagery, all that kind of stuff. If I were to think about something that exists within the ecosystem of someone's content, then I would look at it in terms of, okay, well, how can we utilize your existing brand? How do we utilize your existing system to make this landing page really, really shine? So we're less focused on the branding aspect, but we're more focused on the messaging. So we would work together to understand exactly what it is you're trying to communicate. We can go through a workshop to develop that content. And then we want to make sure that throughout that page, you have provided every ample opportunity to capture attention as best possible. So the a good example of that, especially for something like a landing page, do you have any associated content that would go with that landing page? I could help you develop like a little one pager that outlines it in more detail, because instead of jamming all the information on a one pager or on a landing page, maybe you take some of that content, you explain it in more detail for the people who are interested, you provide them with a downloadable PDF, quick and easy, you have a call to action, there's something for people to go through. Or maybe it's as simple as creating some sort of form, because then we can talk about things like automation and making sure people are getting followed up to. Like there are so many different pieces to projects like this, and I think we would just need to sit down and understand the final outcome of that landing page. Because what I find a lot of clients in this kind of with this kind of outcome that's more broad, it's a lot to think about and a lot to consider, and you're trying to do everything instead of just one piece. I think we need to kind of zoom in a little bit more and
You
tackle
use
it piece
so
by
I
piece.
really like that do one thing at a time insight, because
Hmm.
if you have a head air image like or a hero statement or whatever it's called, like the job of that is to get attention. That's its only job. You know what I mean? And then whatever
Yeah,
the next job is, and then I like the idea of don't jam the rest of it there. Give somebody something to click, if they're interested in going further. I love
exactly.
that. You mentioned the word workshop a couple of times. What does that look like?
Absolutely. No, so that's, and I would do something like this across the board. So it's not just unique to, say, like creating content or like a brand workshop, for example. So when I say a workshop, I'm really doing a deep dive into like what the client is interested in doing. If it is a brand workshop, I would walk them through, like, from absolute zero to getting an understanding of where their brand might want to be. I would give them like there could be like a little bit of color theory involved, for example, like what colors, what feelings you want to evoke from your brand. Let's see what kind of colors we can apply to that. Is there certain font stylings that you want applied to it? Is there a certain kind of feeling or approach that you want to be perceived as? What is, like, even just like a non-visual thing, like what is your mission? Like, you have a mission statement. Do you have like kind of like a driving force behind everything that you do? Because that's just as important as something visual. You could have a very beautifully visually intense brand,
Nobody
but
knows what
there's
to do.
no
Yeah.
real substance behind it. Exactly. So you need to marry the two together. So branding exercise, a branding workshop could be something as simple as like actually a visual understanding of what your brand is, but it could also just be like helping you like ideate behind it. What is the substance of your brand, and how can we move that from more of the like the imaginative aspect to something that's physical and tangible, making sure that along that kind of timeline, each touch point and each kind of like checkpoint that you're completing is adding on to what you're doing, as opposed to just adding to this web of content that you have and you don't know how to interact with. So what you said before is really important. Like kind of getting each job done individually. That's huge for me, because I want to make sure that the content that we're creating isn't just, and when I say content, it's just a general term for everything. What we're creating is talking to each other. Like your brand has to be cohesive. It can't just be me developing stuff for the sake of it, because from one LinkedIn post to another LinkedIn post 2 months down the road, they look completely different. How's anyone supposed to recognize that? How are you supposed to know? Right. So everything just has to work in.
And when you say workshop, that sounds to me like you and the relevant stakeholders from the company coming together and working through a process together. One of the things that I always find with my team, being that we're a younger company, is at some point, one of us needs to make a judgment call, right? So we pick up a statement for the beginning, we have some options. We don't actually know what's going to resonate with our audience, but we can guess at it, right? And so the quality of our guesses. So is there an A/B testing world, or like what does that look like in order to kind of figure out?
100%. And I think you would need to really break down the different kind of pieces that you're looking to test, right? So maybe it's the way to think about it is more in terms of more of like the concrete aspects that you can't change, that you can't really A/B test, and then the non-concrete aspects that you can A/B test. So to distinguish the two, for example, if you were to say design a new logo, that's something that is almost like A/B tested internally. You can't A/B test once you've gone live. Unless, I mean, you can, but then you run the risk of having to rebrand and rechange and pay for new branding and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of A/B testing comes from like an internal perspective that you can work with your team. I would go through and provide a variety of different logo options, provide some with some color schemes, a little bit of background and context as to why this happened. And I would do the exact same thing for like, say, like websites, for example. Whenever I design a website, I always provide at least 2 homepage options that are very different in style. That way you can see the things that you like and the things that you don't like. And then you can decide, wow, I put one beside each other and I really don't like how one looks like. And I really like how one does look like. So you're doing this like internal A/B testing. Once you then go to like this kind of like non-concrete stuff where you can A/B test, you can absolutely create any number of pieces that are more specific and more niche to any sort of like audience segment. So for example, if you were to create a landing page based off of your business, maybe say you want to talk to professionals in a certain industry. So if you're talking to people in like the tech space, you could create literally a landing page that is geared towards that technological space, and you can speak directly to them based off of the verbiage that they might use. And then you could create, say, ads for that tech space. You can run ads that lead directly to that landing page. The beauty of that is you can have a second landing page for, say, folks in like the culinary space, let's say, and then you speak directly to them. You are then targeting each of these little audience segments based off of their space. So there's a ton of A/B testing that you can do from a copy perspective, creative perspective, and just like the
one thing about A/B testing is if I wanted to test an ad, for example, I can pay for eyeballs and test an ad. Like it's the amount of I'm paying to test in real time. But if I wanted to test, if I wanted to A/B test a landing page or a click magnet or something like that, now I got to pay for the eyeballs to get to the landing page in the first run. And now I'm testing, right? So like the cost to A/B test, the further down your journey you go, I feel the more expensive it gets to test. And as an entrepreneur who I've been many times in my life, I've started new companies. Later, when you have a lot of traffic, it kind of it becomes a lot easier. But you have to figure out how to make the best use of your resources when you're just starting out, and you don't have
Mhm.
large amounts of consistent traffic all the time. So you have to be very selective
Mhm.
at what you A/B test. Is there any wisdom you have here or any knowledge you have here that would be valuable to share?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, so I think from my perspective, because I'm not focused more so on like
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
marketing aspect of like the like when someone gets say I'm running some ads with some folks and I provide them their creative, I can provide my recommendations based off of what it looks like and some of that content. Generally, I don't get involved in terms of the results.
With
They
the
would come
result.
back to
Okay.
me with their feedback, and then I would adjust with them. So I'm a little bit removed from like a marketing perspective in terms
Well,
of
that goes
like
back to what you
getting
were saying
those
about
eyeballs even
specialization, right?
further in.
Yeah.
Exactly. But from what you're saying in terms of like a someone who's new in the space, and someone who might not have the resources to do this kind of stuff, I would just like it's funny to say, but like stick with what you started with. Like if you get it done right and you plan from the onset and you've really thought it through, you've developed like a robust brand strategy, a robust kind of like just general branding in terms of color, logo, all that kind of stuff. Stick with it. Like there's so much that you will be putting away from your clients if you are constantly trying to pivot, if you're constantly trying to change these just general recognition aspects, that if you keep being indecisive or you keep changing all this kind of content, no one is going to ever understand what it is that you're doing. Always remember that you can always add on to your brand. You can always add on to the content, whether that's through like blogs or articles or copy website changes and stuff like that. But have a solid foundation and try to develop that as you go. Don't just pivot every single time
Well,
you
Travis, thank
notice.
you for this conversation. I think for me, the biggest insight that came out of it was the idea of doing one thing at a time and just being very clear, like, all right, I need this asset, whether it's a web page, a landing page, a click magnet, an ad, whatever it is, like I need this asset. What is the one job that this asset has? Because the minute you start to have 2 and 3 jobs is the minute that it stops becoming an effective asset. So that was the biggest takeaway for me. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, of course. And again, the path might be different for other folks in terms of what they're looking for and the types of deliverables. Maybe you go to a large agency who can deliver all of those things, but understand that there is a very hefty price tag because you're doing multiple things, and it might not be
It's
those
always
that
the
you want
hard
to take.
part is
So
starting out, right? Later when it's all humming, it's easy.
100%.
The starting out is hard.
Exactly.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for spending some time with me. I really appreciate getting to know you, and hearing your story. And for those out there who are early in their journey and thinking about entrepreneurship, I guess we have to tell them, find your path in a way that works for you, because the standard path or the path that you're told is what you should do maybe isn't the right one. Maybe that's where we leave them. If you feel drawn to go into entrepreneurship, right? If you don't feel drawn, then by no means. But it sounds like you were drawn to it and you found a way to make it work for you, despite some of the risk that you were worried about, despite some of those things. So, Travis, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And yeah, there are many paths that people can take, and I think that you just have to find the one that works best for you.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. See you next time on the Wednesdays Off podcast.